All right, welcome to the Baseline Scoop, talking all things past, present, and future about your Philadelphia 76ers. I'm your host, Zach Ciavolella, and today, for International Podcast Day, I have a special guest to join me here today, and that is a good friend of mine, fellow lead Sixers writer for PSN, editor of Fansided, co-host of the Bullpen Blues. The point is he does a lot of things. And that's my man, David Esser. David, how you doing today?
Zach, I'm doing well, man. I'm super excited to be on the pod today.
I'm super excited to have you. This is awesome. Something that really wanted to get together for quite a bit. And I picked really the conversations that, I didn't want to have with anyone else but you. So really there's a lot going on this offseason for the Sixers. There's coaching news breaking every other day. Ty Lue's in the lead. Now Mike D'Antoni's in the lead. Oh, Doc Rivers got fired. Now we got something else to talk about there. It's just been kind of an endless back and forth of who's really the top dog. So I think that for this conversation, and let me know if you agree, let's skip Ty Lue. I don't believe either of us are particularly high on him. We can talk another time about why we don't really feel that he's going to move the needle for the Sixers. I think the two, even though the Sixers may be much more interested in Lue, Mike D'Antoni and Doc Rivers both have a better shot of improving the team.
Yeah, and on the Ty Lue stuff real quick, although we might not be sold on him, it does seem like the Sixers are pretty sold on him. Unfortunately, pretty much everything I've heard close to the team is that he's still in the lead as of today. It's more of just a negotiation tactic to lower his price, which is whatever. Again, we could talk about that another time. So between the Doc and the Mike D'Antoni discussion, it's my understanding that you're more of a Doc Rivers guy, and I'm more of a Mike D'Antoni guy. So I actually wanted to pick your brain a little bit here and say, why are you so sold on Doc Rivers at the moment?
Well, This is the unfortunate tie-in of this head coaching search and the state of our nation right now, and it's not so much about me being particularly sold on Doc Rivers, although I do think that he is a good coach. It's just about him being better than the next guys in line. Doc Rivers, he does absolutely have a decorated career. He's worked with star upon star, superstar, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, obviously, most recently Paul George, Kawhi Leonard. So he has experience working with big personalities. Obviously, everyone's been hearing about how that was part of the issue with the Clippers towards the end. I think that's a little more of a unique situation. I think, by and large, he's done a good job managing those big personalities. And as long as you are not giving him control of the front office, which I think should be true for every coach, it just really doesn't work out. Really just from an X's and O's perspective, which less than a guy like Kenny Atkinson. Let me be clear about that, okay? The bigger thing is that we have to look at the pool of guys that the Sixers are actually interested in. It's been narrowed down to this three, okay? So I just feel that the negatives of Doc Rivers, they're just less than the negatives that come with Tyronn Lue, that come with Mike D'Antoni. And I think he seriously does have a lot of positives. The other thing is Tobias Harris. We can get more into this a little bit. Best seasons under Doc Rivers, hands down. So let's focus on the positives, though, okay? So he's had NBA championship experience. He's had a ton of playoff experience, star managing experience. That's something that can be said about a lot of different guys. Mike D'Antoni, your guy. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what you think he kind of brings to the table, why you're maybe not so high, but higher on him than Doc Rivers?
Yeah, and for starters, I definitely agree with the point that we're scraping the bottom of the barrel here with some of these coaching hires. A lot of these guys got fired for their inability to achieve in the postseason, which is what essentially got Brett Brown fired. So it's not like this is a clear, cut and dry, fire Brown to get a way, 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 way better head coach. I think there's some serious negatives to each individual candidate. In regards to Mike D'Antoni, because a lot of people dislike D'Antoni for, kind of the wonky offense he runs, the lack of defense, their inability to get over that hump into an NBA championship. My thing with D'Antoni is, at the bare minimum, change is going to happen. There's a 0% chance that D'Antoni comes into this team and enters the season with the same roster. 0% chance. There's a 0% chance that you don't see Ben Simmons used in a different type of role, or Joel Embiid used in a less stereotypical post-up offense. They're going to get him involved in different ways. I think you would see Tobias Harris involved in different ways. You would see guys like, I think Furkan Korkmaz, I think would get a pretty big role in a Mike D'Antoni system where it's just 3-ball spacing, open court. We want to talk about it later with the James Harden discussion, which we don't want to put a ton of stock into. But I think with D'Antoni, there's that element of if D'Antoni's not happy within a year, he's going to blow this thing up. And as much as I love the Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid partnership, and I think it can win this team multiple championships, there's a point where it's like, all right, like we haven't gotten success in a couple years now. When do we blow this thing up for real? And we stop trying to plug and play little pieces. You get the safe coaching hire, you get the stereotypical defense first coaching hire. At some point, this team has underachieved the last 3 seasons in a row to an extent. Bringing in D'Antoni, at the bare minimum, he's going to really, really push this team into making serious change, whether in the front office, whether in the assistant coaching department, or just the way they run their team from a personnel standpoint with the players on the court. D'Antoni's going to mix this thing up.
You do bring up a valid point, specifically, one that stuck out to me is talking about if in a year we're in the same situation, when do we have that conversation about blowing it up? And, the argument for so long, coming from myself, coming from other Sixers writers that I know has been be patient with Simmons, be patient with Embiid. And I don't think what you're saying is not to be patient, but it's more so kind of trying to find this balance. And I agree with this, where yes, you have to be patient, but at a certain point, you also have to capitalize on their value. Because if you continue to just grind out year after year after year, and it's not working, you're just hitting your head against a wall, at a certain point, you stop going up that incline of value and you start working your way down a little more. Who's to say that you're really just increasing your chances of Joel Embiid getting hurt again? The more years that Ben Simmons does not have a jump shot, that's going to hurt his value as well. So, at a certain point, at a certain time, if it doesn't work, then you're right. That conversation has to happen about moving on from either Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid, or both. I'm not hoping for both, but that's, again, another option in that conversation. And I think you're absolutely right that Mike D'Antoni, one of his pros is that he is not going to be complacent. He's not going to just sit by while you have Al Horford either playing power forward, which he is not, or being a $100 million bench center. You won't have Tobias Harris playing out of place. Perhaps even Ben Simmons out of place. That's still something that has to be figured out, is what exactly is his position. Kind of the reason I like Doc Rivers is that I think Doc Rivers is kind of not to the maybe extreme of Mike D'Antoni, but kind of play around a little bit with certain lineups, and I'm curious to see what he does with Ben Simmons. My opinion, Ben Simmons started as a point guard. Obviously, he made the transfer to power forward. Brett moved him to. I want to see him at small forward. I want to see him at small forward with unless you can get an absolute sniper at small forward. But I say you go with a guy like Ben there, and you get yourself, if you're keeping Tobias Harris, move Tobias to the 4. Let him work in his natural position, okay? Something where Simmons can focus on defense, on slashing, on offense, that is. And then when it comes to his jump shot, hopefully it comes sooner rather than later, but it can kind of just be a cherry on top kind of, real skill that he has. And then at that point, that's when you get your 2 young guards, or not necessarily young, but just your 2 guards who can absolutely shoot. Kind of following a Miami Heat formula, where you have your defensive ball handling small forward, point forward really would be, and then you have your absolute, not quite unicorn, but just enigma of a center, kind of like how they had Bam Adebayo. Joel Embiid is similar in that fashion. And then from there, it's about getting your Duncan Robinson. It's about getting your Goran Dragic. It's about really getting your Jay Crowder, somebody who's going to stretch the field and, at the same time play serviceable defense. So, to be honest, I'm perfectly okay with Mike D'Antoni. I am not even necessarily against Mike D'Antoni, but just from, I guess for the same reason that you love that idea about how he could even theoretically blow it up if it doesn't work. I think that's what scares me a little bit, and I see Doc Rivers as a little more of a safer option in that regard. So, thankfully, if it's one of those two guys, I think the Sixers are in okay hands. Again, it's not their best options, but they're better than Ty Lue is all I can say.
Yeah, no, anybody but Ty Lue, he's a disaster. I'm not sold on him being some offensive enigma. But real quick to kind of push back on the idea, because I think I made it sound a little bit like I was pro trading away a Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons in the near future. No, absolutely not. You keep those two together as long as humanly possible. I think with D'Antoni, and you touched on it a little bit with the idea of how the Heat have constructed their roster with a Duncan Robinson, and a Tyler Hero, these guys who are just wicked good floor spacers. I think that's what D'Antoni would bring to this roster, where I think he would look at what he has in Ben Simmons, has in Joel Embiid, and be like, these are the two best players I've ever been able to coach. Better than a James Harden. James Harden's great offensively. He does not provide even close to what a Simmons can provide on defense, or even from a ball handling aspect. I think D'Antoni looked at that and he's like, I have two superstars. I need to surround these two with as much floor spacing, as much ball handling as humanly possible, and everything else will figure itself out. And I truly believe if you take that approach, it would. Whereas with the Doc Rivers, it's kind of like, is he going to make those necessary changes, or is he going to run his stereotypical, kind of 2010s era basketball where it's a lot of post-ups, a lot of pick and rolls, as opposed to just five wide, and get as much space on that court as humanly possible for Ben Simmons.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to see for both of them. Not that many have had an opportunity to coach a center like Joel Embiid, but neither of them have. And so it'll be interesting to see what kind of offense around them. I definitely understand and even agree with your point about D'Antoni where, he's going to back shooting. You know that you don't have to convince him, coerce him into the idea of adding shooters to this team. I just think that Doc Rivers, he's not a dumb man. I think that anyone really who's worth their weight in their contract, they're going to understand that shooting is the answer, and really surrounding their team with that. On paper, the Clippers team that was assembled was a great roster. I think part of the reasons that you saw Doc's exit, especially the way that it was, I don't know how compatible a lot of those guys were together. They're all very aggressive, and that's great. Kind of like the term for Jimmy Butler is like a dog. You love that mentality on the one hand, but I kind of feel on the other hand, it takes a certain kind of coach to deal with that. And that's not a good thing. That's not a bad thing saying about the coach or the players. It's just a matter of it wasn't the right fit with Doc Rivers and that specific roster. I think that with what you have and what you keep with the Sixers, you have an opportunity to kind of create a good fitting roster like the Clippers, but one that's not only a good fit on the court, but also in the locker room. But again, that's something that is time's going to have to show if that actually happens or if that's just speculation beforehand. But anyway, so I think the point that we're both on is I like Doc a little more. You like Mike a little more. Both of them over Ty Lue. That's, I think, what we can agree on. But I really do want to get into, so you had written a piece on James Harden. It was just, it swept Sixers Twitter, talking about not even the possibility, but the alleged interest Mike D'Antoni had bringing James Harden to the 76ers. Everyone's talking about the possibility, it can be done via trade, it can be done via free agency in 2022. So, really, David, what are your thoughts on that concept? How could it be possible? Should it be possible? Really, what are you thinking there?
Yeah, so it was initially reported by John Clark of NBC Sports Philadelphia, and it was kind of just thrown out there, like, Mike D'Antoni might want to bring James Harden either via a trade or free agency. And I was like, all right, let's run with this. Do I think it's even remotely likely or possible? Probably not. I would put the percentage like 2% that James Harden ever wears a Philadelphia 76ers jersey for a lot of different reasons. But I was like, all right, let's attack this. And if you're looking at getting Harden now, it has to be a trade. And it would have to be Joel Embiid. I don't think you trade Ben Simmons. I think with the way D'Antoni hypothetically would run his offense, he would value someone like Simmons more than Embiid. Okay, so I put it out there. I was like, let's trade Joel Embiid for James Harden and see what happens. My biggest takeaway was I think it would be really, really fun. I don't think it would be effective. As great of a scorer as James Harden is, he's a flawed player when it comes to the postseason. That's been pretty well documented. The hypothetical of running Simmons as like a small ball center and Harden at point guard and just chucking up lobs to each other left and right, I think both would have the most productive seasons of their entire career. It would just be 120 points at least every single night. Does that partnership thrive in the postseason up against a Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, against a LeBron and Anthony Davis, hypothetically? Likely not. The other big idea was like, all right, you wait 2 years for James Harden to hit free agency at 33 years old. That's a bad idea. That's a really bad idea. The last thing this team needs to do is continue to overpay for aging talent. James Harden's not going to be the same player in 2 years that he is today. And again, even today, he's a flawed player today. The idea that he's going to somehow improve at the age of 33 is pretty unlikely. So again, I kind of concluded the article with the concept that it would be really, really fun to watch James Harden put up 30 a night with Ben Simmons averaging a triple-double alongside him. Do I think it would be better long-term for this team than just keeping Simmons and Embiid together and just doing your best to build around those two? Probably not.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. You know, a lot of what you just said there, actually. If they're going to trade one, Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons, listen, Philly loves Joel Embiid. If you're that front office, you're making a mistake if you side with, and when I say older than Simmons, an older center who has had conditioning and injury issues over somebody who looks like they're going to play the next 15 years at a high level. I mean, Ben Simmons is an enigma of an athlete. Yes, he has his flaws. They both do. But really, it's not much of a decision. You got to keep Ben Simmons. You would have to trade Joel Embiid, which I don't want to do. Okay? Moving on, though. Talking about adding James Harden in free agency. James Harden, you said he was 33, will he be?
In 2 years, he would be 33 years old.
33. James Harden had the second highest usage rating of any qualified NBA player this season.
Yeah.
That's not going down anytime soon. I don't even know what he'll look like in 2 years. You know, the guy's he's been fantastic, obviously. He's been a fantastic regular season player. One of the best, okay? But when you play a guy like that hard, he wasn't a rookie 2-3 years ago, okay? You know, he is already up there a little bit, okay? It's a dangerous game, especially for somebody who focuses on things such as, you know, getting proper free throws, shooting 10+ threes a game. He's not a Kyle Korver type shooter. You know, he's not going to be shooting 40% into his twilight years. So you're going to see the efficiency continue to go down. You're going to see the numbers start to come down. And he's not signing for a cheap deal in 2022. So you're just going to have another expensive, maybe not as bad as Horford, but pretty bad deal on your books. And I just don't see it happening. The other thing I want to bring up real quick, there are so many trades that you will see, whether you're on whatever social media platform, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and when everyone was really talking about the James Harden trade, so many people, they thought, oh, wait, it's okay. You don't have to trade Simmons or Embiid because you can trade, and so this is one that I had seen, was Tobias Harris, Matisse Thybulle, Shake Milton, and 3 first-round picks. And to be honest, I think that's one of those rare trades where I don't think either of the teams would even consider it. I don't know. I mean, if I had to pick a side that would take it, I'd probably pick Houston. But you're not getting a great player back if you're Houston in that case. And you're talking about 3 high draft picks. That's not a great haul for James Harden. Conversely, you're talking about losing a future great role player, Matisse Thybulle. Shake Milton, we still don't know what he can be. He's shown a lot of potential. I'm not saying he's ever going to be an all-star, but he's a good young player on a cheap deal. And then you're giving up your future draft picks. We just saw how that hurt the Clippers, who are now going through who knows what's going to happen there. They may even end up trading one of their superstars. Listen, it's not going to happen without trading Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons, and it's not worth trading Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons. So I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with you on that. I really want to move on from James Harden, but before we do, David, do you have anything else to say on that matter? Anything that Sixers fans should really know about why the team should not consider James Harden?
So what? Paul George went for 7 first-rounders and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, is that correct? Like, that's the bar you're looking at. These Tobias Harris, Matisse, and I actually disagree with your point that the Sixers wouldn't want to do that. I think if the Sixers could get James Harden and keep Simmons and Embiid, they would do it in a heartbeat. I would do it in a heartbeat.
Well, you know what? I'll just say that scares me terribly.
Screw it. If you can get those 3 together, you're going to make the finals. But these ideas, and this goes beyond Harden, like you're not getting anything back for a Tobias Harris. You're not getting anything real back for a Shake Milton. Even a lot of the first round picks, which the team has just been throwing away willy-nilly, like you're not going to get some random superstar all-star knocking on your door for Shake Milton in a first round pick. It's just not going to happen. You have a few key trade pieces. Obviously, you have Simmons and Embiid, who I would consider untouchable at the moment. You have Josh Richardson, who I think could fetch you some value. And you have Al Horford, who are going to move pretty much no matter what. But the idea that you're going to flip any of these guys for a James Harden or even a Victor Oladipo, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that some of your high-priced contracts, they have some value, but it does not equal a Bradley Beal, does not equal a Devin Booker. You're talking about getting depth. You're talking about them as salary matching. A lot of people are talking about having to trade them and give up additional assets just to get the money off the books. So it's definitely not something that it's just not going to happen. But anyway, to move on from one shooting guard linked to the Sixers to another, let's talk about everybody's favorite trade target, Buddy Hield. David, as long as the Buddy Hield talks have been alive, I know that you've been right at the center of it. A huge fan of the idea from the beginning. You actually wrote way back in April about a piece about bringing Buddy Hield to Philly, specifically because it seems like he kind of wants to be here, or at least, is having fun with the fans a little bit, So why don't you tell us a little bit about why Buddy Hield, why he's important, why, is it even Hield? Is it more about a player like him? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so that Buddy Hield article is actually really funny because I wrote it back in April and we were talking about it before we got on air. It does like 500 views every week just because people want Hield to be on the Sixers so bad. So to touch on your first point with Buddy Hield, is it necessarily about bringing him to Philly or bringing someone like him to Philly? It's bringing someone like him to Philly. He shoots threes at a high volume. He hits them at a respectable rate. He's a good on-ball defender for the most part. He pairs up well with Simmons. He's young. He's only 27. It seems like he wants to be here. That's the dream fit. A guy who shoots the ball a lot, who's not 35 years old, and is on a big contract where you can actually find a way to exchange the money because the Sixers are so far over the luxury tax. The idea of, not being able to match up contracts is pretty unreasonable. But with Buddy Hield is, if you can get him, great. I think at this point, it would have to include Josh Richardson. When I wrote the initial article, I was like, we can flip Al Horford in a first-round pick for him. That's not going to happen. I do think Buddy Hield gets moved. I think there will be a decent market for him because he essentially got paid $100 million to ride the Sacramento bench, similar to how Al Horford was treated here in Philadelphia. But with Buddy Hield is if you can't get Buddy Hield, that's okay. You don't have to give up multiple first-round picks to get Buddy Hield. In fact, I would urge the Sixers to consider not even giving up one first-round pick for Buddy Hield because you need those first-round picks to get legit shooters around Simmons and Embiid. But just somebody who loves to chuck up threes, whether it's Buddy Hield or someone way, way, way less good, that's fine. You just need guys who want to shoot the basketball, and everything else will figure itself out around Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I love Buddy. So far as to send him a DM, which was promptly not returned, just to tell him that he would be a perfect fit in Philadelphia. Just his game fits so well. You brought up a point about his defense, which I think is an underrated aspect. He's not going to be confused with Thibault, but so many people look at shooters like Hield, and the thought is J.J. Redick, James Harden, that he can't defend. He just can't defend. It's not the case. Buddy Hield is so much more interested in playing defense than either of those two guys. I think that's a very underrated point about him. And I definitely agree, too, that while I love Buddy Hield, It's much more about getting a player like him. He's not a necessity. He's that ideal dream situation, like you were saying, where, really kind of all the stars seem like they're aligning for the Sixers to get him. By all accounts, it seems he wants to be here. He clearly does not want to be in Sacramento, which I think, maybe not a lot, but it drives down that trade value a little bit because he's, in a way, sort of forcing his way out as best he can. I certainly agree that you shouldn't have to, and you just shouldn't, period, give up a first-round pick for Hield, especially not this year's. This year's draft pick is a lot more important than people realize, because while this draft is talked about left and right, oh, it's a weak draft, there's no stars, and I absolutely agree with that. This draft is actually sneaky good for role players, especially some shooters on the back end, players like Tyrell Terry, Desmond Bane, two guys, by the way, who just spoke about their interviews with the Sixers and how well they went and what they can provide to the team. So there are definitely some options at 21, even some of the early second-round picks the Sixers have. But frankly, I think that Horford, who Sacramento, I think still has a little bit of interest in, but it's much more so about Josh Richardson. I think that Josh Richardson is absolutely the key to that deal. And really, if you get Hield, great. If not, move on to guys like Seth Curry, try and reunite with JJ Redick. Again, Buddy Hield, best situation, but not necessarily the only player who's going to fix that issue. Because, again, not to bring it back to the Miami Heat, look at Duncan Robinson's fit. Duncan Robinson is not Buddy Hield. He's not Buddy Hield in terms of volume. He's not Buddy Hield in terms of defensive ability. Because, again, Duncan Robinson I put into that J.J. Redick, James Harden, you worry about their defense conversation. Even Furkan Korkmaz, with a much higher usage rate, essentially. But, if you have that guy who you just don't have to worry about in catch and shoot situations, who occasionally he can work off a screen and get you a shot, doesn't really create his own shot, but if you're running the pick and roll, he can get you a three every now and again. That's the kind of player that you need. So whether it's a Seth Curry, again, a JJ Redick, whomever it is, as long as they shoot, they're going to help this team. They're going to be absolutely huge for the development also of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. So it's just about getting that type of player. So, but one player that we did talk about also while we were talking about Buddy Hield is who we would like to flip him for. That's Al Horford, right? So Al Horford, can you see any possible way that he plays another game for the Sixers?
No, I don't. I think he's gone 100%. It would be a complete malpractice to keep him around. Like what are we doing here? Like, it was such a stupid signing, and as information came out, it sounded like Alex Rucker and Cohen and whoever else was pulling the strings had some weird analytic department driven up that this made sense. It didn't. It was an overcorrection. They didn't have a backup center, so they went and dropped $100 million on one. Whatever. Acknowledge it's a mistake. And again, this goes back to my previous point about trade expectations this offseason. You're not flipping Al Horford for a superstar. You're not even flipping him for, in my opinion, a serviceable starter. Why would anybody want him? He's on a stupid big contract. He was completely tossed out of the rotation by the end of the season. He looked horrible. His defense was down. His offensive production was down. His rebounding was down. His assist numbers were down. He looked really, really bad. And there's been some talk of him being a poor fit in Philadelphia, which is obviously true. But he's also just regressing. He's old. He looked out of shape. He didn't move the way he used to before. I mean, defense is an effort thing. It's not a scheme thing. If you can't stay with your guy, that's on you. It's not like the Sixers run some sort of super complicated zone scheme that didn't fit Al Horford. They just play man-to-man defense. It's not that hard. He didn't know how to defend a pick and roll to save his life. So with Al Horford, if you can dump him and just get out of the contract, do it. If you have to attach some second-round picks to him, do it. If you have to attach even an exciting young player like a Shake Milton, I would do it. And I'm a huge Shake Milton fan. But you got to get out of that contract. You got to get that noise away. For as much of a pro and leader that Horford was for Boston, he's been pretty destructive to the Philadelphia locker room. There was a few cases before the bubble where he was borderline talking crap about the fans, about the organization, about his teammates. You just got to get that out.
Shush. Yeah,
he was shushing us after making mid-range jumpers, whatever. You just have to get him out and, kind of compound on the point you were making before, a Seth Curry, a JJ Redick. you're obviously giving up more value in Horford for a guy like that, like a role player, but do it. It doesn't matter. The benefit you would get from a Seth Curry on this roster would be almost triple what you got from Al Horford in 2019. So yeah, I don't see him sticking around. You hope they get rid of him. You hope they don't have to attach too much to him. Maybe 1 or 2 second-round picks, that's fine. You hope they don't have to give up a first-round pick to get out of it. If you have to, I'm considering it. You hope you get to keep a Matisse Thybulle and a Shake Milton and a Furkan Korkmaz. If you have to give up one of them to get out of Horford's contract, again, I would seriously consider it.
Yeah, I would consider it, but I need to get something back if I'm giving up Thybulle or Shake Milton. Maybe I'm not getting the same value that Shake or Matisse are, but if it's, say, Horford and Matisse for another bloated contract that's only on for 1 year, I don't think I can do quite that. If I'm doing Horford in a couple seconds for a contract like that, I'm good. Totally good. But I try not to overvalue Matisse Thybulle like a lot of people have, but he does absolutely serve a role on this roster going forward. It'd be tough for me to part ways with him, especially since he's so young. But I agree with Shake Milton. I definitely agree with your point that if we're just trading Horford, we're probably going to have to, give something out along with him just to move him. I've identified in my mind the only 5 teams that I can think of that would even consider an Al Horford trade. And that's Charlotte, because they have Nicholas Batum's contract, and they said, listen, we're open for business. We'll take big contracts, but we want draft picks. So if they want, they'll take on Al Horford. They'll take 2 second-round picks, probably the early second-round picks, because you're going to want actual value. And then they'll give us Nick Batum. That's something I could see realistically happening. The Cleveland Cavaliers in some Kevin Love trade only because he again tries to force his way out. I think Love and the Cavs have, in a sense, kind of patched things up, but you just never know. Losing does a lot to you, especially if you've had a decorated career like Love has. Again, still, you're giving up pieces. A trade for Love, that's a situation where you might see the Sixers giving up a Shake Milton in lieu of or in addition to those second-round picks. As far as actually good teams that instead of just doing it for the picks might actually send you back a couple players, hopefully, maybe Chicago. Chicago just hired Billy Donovan. Billy Donovan was the head coach of the University of Florida, where Al Horford attended. They won a championship together. That being said, you're not doing it for Zach LaVine. You're not doing it for Lauri Markkanen. You're doing it probably for lower-level guys on expiring deals. Thad Young, Tomas Satoransky. You're not even getting Otto Porter. Otto Porter has so much more value to that Bulls team than Al Horford would. So you're getting the bottom of the barrel contracts from Chicago. And then otherwise it's Houston, maybe Houston. I don't think so. I've just been told by so many people Houston, possibly. The final team, Sacramento, and again, that's if you're pairing Josh Richardson, and I still think you got to take on more money back, like a Corey Joseph or Harrison Barnes.
Well, and I want to throw Dallas out there, too, as the 6th team that I think could happen. When they lost in the postseason, they came out pretty abruptly and were like, we're looking to add a veteran, a savvy veteran this offseason, which was kind of just thrown out there because it's like, all right, like Luka's only in his 2nd year, no need to panic. But if they're looking for a veteran who can play defense and be an anchor at that 5 position as you look to outduel Anthony Davis going forward, Al Horford makes sense to a degree. Again, you're probably not getting a lot back, maybe a Harrison Barnes-esque contract, or you just attach some draft picks and do your best to send Horford on his way out to Texas, and that's fine too. So I think Dallas makes a lot of sense. I like the Billy Donovan reuniting idea. I think that makes a lot of sense. But again, in all 6 of those hypotheticals, you're not getting the team's all-star back in return. You're just dumping Horford. You're saying goodbye. You're thanking him for his services, and you're rolling forward with Joel Embiid as the only center in the starting lineup.
The Dallas Mavericks, in so many senses, make perfect sense for Al Horford. Now, the reason I left them off my list, and it was something that I refused to believe for so long, Kristaps Porzingis actually enjoys playing center. That's something that blew my mind when I read that. That being said, on the one hand, you have a tough situation where you're going to your second best player, your Robin, and you're saying, hey, we're going to bring in a guy. He kind of sucked at power forward last year, so we're kind of hoping that he can play center. Are you okay moving to power forward? You're going to get one or two responses. You're going to get, no, I'm the center of this team, and I'm sticking here. Or what I hope, and this is not even just because I want to get rid of Horford's contract. This is just what I hope for a lot of NBA players, is that Porzingis says, all right, whatever the team needs. And Porzingis moves to power forward, Al Horford moves to center, and then you have a wonderful-looking roster for Rick Carlisle down there in Dallas. I think you're absolutely right. Dallas, on paper, makes a good fit. Once you get the okay from Kristaps, perfect. Send over Horford, maybe 2 seconds, early seconds again, and you can get Dwight Powell, backup center, who was hurt this year, and hopefully you can get Seth Curry. And maybe that gets it done. Probably add in Justin Jackson for salary matching. But on paper, Dallas makes absolute sense. They just need to get the green light from Porzingis. And then I think it'd be a great pairing. Probably best case scenario for both teams.
Yeah, and again, and this kind of goes back to the Buddy Hield discussion. If Dallas doesn't want to do that, that's fine. Move on. Don't get hung up in trying to get the perfect Al Horford trade or even the perfect Josh Richardson trade. Like, whatever it is, just get them off. Like, do what you can to rebuild the roster. If you can get Seth Curry, fantastic. We all get excited. I go buy a Curry jersey tomorrow. If you can't, that's okay. Go hit up Chicago, go hit up Charlotte, go hit up whoever is looking to get some free second-round picks, and you call it a day, and you're all good. You bring in D'Antoni, you bring in Doc Rivers, everybody's happy. It's not a big deal.
Absolutely. Establish a clear pecking order, work your way down the list. Don't be afraid to move on. It's like when you go to buy a new car, be ready to leave, okay? Yeah, you can't 100%. Be hung up, or they're just going to rob you just like Hinkie did back in the day. If I'm making a power ranking of it, number one, I want that Buddy Hield deal.
Yeah.
If it doesn't happen, all right, move on. Dallas, Seth Curry? No? Okay. Moving on, Chicago. I'm going to leave Houston off the list because, again, I'm just so unsure. It's just you don't know what's going to happen there without Mike D'Antoni. You're really going to see how much of that no center philosophy was really Mike, how much was, what the players are pushing for, the organization was pushing for. And, I mean, even still, you're giving up. That might be a situation where you give up Matisse Thybulle. And it's for, Al Horford and Thybulle for guys like, I can't see them parting with P.J. Tucker, but from a salary standpoint, P.J. Tucker and Eric Gordon.
Yeah,
that's
Eric
the kind
Gordon
of situation
makes
that
sense
you're talking
in that
about.
discussion. Even though he sucks, I don't want him.
I agree. Wholeheartedly agree. But that's the kind of deal that you're looking at. So anyway, Sacramento, Dallas, Chicago, Charlotte, Cleveland, and then I guess Houston. But, you got to establish that order, what you want, and then just be ready to walk on. Because your willingness to leave, it can even possibly incentivize the other team to work with you a little bit. So just to get the best deal for yourself, for your team, for your future. Really the last thing that I want is Eric Gordon I would rather Kevin Love. I don't really want Kevin Love. He's a better fit next to Embiid. It's still an albatross of a contract. I'm still going to have to give up assets in addition to Horford. But I would say that the worst case scenario would be a trade to Houston for a guy like Eric Gordon, who, let's be honest, he'll give you 60 games out of 82, and a lot of those are going to be inefficient. So the important thing really is just understand, like you said, that you don't have to go star hunting. You can focus on adding depth. You have to be ready to walk away. And speaking of star hunting versus adding depth, another piece that you had wrote about also was just really kind of just, let's slow down on blockbuster deals. Everybody loves them. There was a time, David, do you remember before and early on during the bubble when everyone was talking about Devin Booker's going to leave the Suns, and the 76ers need to do everything they can to bring Booker to Philly? Oh, and might I remind you the time where he was playing Call of Duty or whatever. It was either Simmons or Booker, I can't remember which. And one of them had alluded to the possibility of him coming to Philly, and everybody ran with it. So before I get to my feelings on the matter, why don't you really talk about, just kind of, again, emphasize the importance of valuing depth over star power this offseason?
Yeah, and we've been alluding to it all pod today. Glance around the league. Look at who's in the finals. It's Anthony Davis, LeBron James, and a bunch of role players. And Miami, they took it even a step further. It's really just Jimmy Butler and a bunch of role players. You can say Bam's really great, but is he a number one on a team by himself? Probably not. It's Jimmy Butler and a bunch of role players. Even back up to the round before, the Denver Nuggets. It is Jamal Murray, Jokic, and a bunch of role players. At some point, the Sixers have played their big trade card, right? They went out and they got Tobias Harris. They got Jimmy Butler, who turned into Josh Richardson. There's only so many more blockbuster trades you can do with this team and expect the outcome to change. You have Ben Simmons. You have Joel Embiid. You're going to have a new coach. Even though I don't like Tyronn Lue, he is a new voice. He's got a new set of eyes. He's going to be different than Brett Brown. Okay, so you've played that card now. At some point, you have to look at your roster and say, okay, what can we do to help our star players succeed? And it sounds crazy that we're 3 years into this team essentially, and they haven't figured it out yet that the more shooters you surround with these two is going to help this team. We were talking about it before. I would almost rather get Seth Curry and JJ Redick over just getting Buddy Hield, because I think that added depth, and you're going to have to give up less assets too. That added depth, just having as many guys who can sub in, jack up threes, play some decent wing defense, handle the basketball a little bit. It's going to help this team so much more in the next couple of years. And the blueprint's been set. Again, like I just said, there's so many teams around the league who never felt they needed that third star. And they were correct. I mean, even you can look in Cleveland with the LeBron Kyrie. It was LeBron, Kyrie, and a bunch of role players. And that's how they won their championship. So at some point, the team's got to bunker down for a little bit and acknowledge, yes, going on to NBATradeMachine.com and plugging in these wild trade fans, it's a lot of fun. Look, we all love it. I do it too. But that's not how you build a competitive roster at the end of the day. They've tried that. It didn't work. Okay, it's time to settle down, take a deep breath, use your first-round draft picks to get young guys who can shoot the basketball, follow the lead Miami set. You can do it without constantly blowing up the roster every single offseason.
Listen, you just called Cleveland Cavaliers Kevin Love a role player.
He was a role player.
No. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that was really when you started to see the narrative shift from the super team, in a sense, where, and if you look at super teams, you really, there was Golden State, and I mean, how many others can you say really had 3+ true superstars? Kevin Love at one point was a star who transferred to Cleveland, and much like Chris Bosh, he had to take a step back. He was the Chris Bosh on that team, okay? He's not Dwayne Wade. He's not, taking opportunities away from Kyrie Irving. He absolutely served a role, and it worked. It worked in Miami when LeBron felt like actually playing in the finals. It worked in Cleveland, again, when LeBron actually felt like playing in the finals. And, the fact that they were able to win it without him, I mean, that kind of shows some things too. Like the fact that he was injured during the actual finals. He's a role player. He helps you get there. He's not the guy that gets you over their hump, okay? So building around Embiid, building around Simmons, it's absolutely 100% the way to go. Do you remember when the Sixers had JJ Redick, and then they traded at the trade deadline, or maybe they were buyout candidates, if I'm not mistaken, for Marco Bellinelli and Ersan Ilyasova, and the way that team looked, just how fluid everything was with those shooters around Embiid and Simmons. Just, it's beautiful. And that wasn't a perfect team either. That was just, that's the bottom level. That's the base level of what those guys look like with shooters around them. If you can add a Buddy Hield, if you can bring JJ back, let's just say you add a Buddy Hield, and then you go out and you sign veterans who can shoot. You got Langston Galloway. You can bring back Marco Bellinelli. You can sign a DJ Augustine. Depth is absolutely the key, because you're going to need guys go cold, guys get injured, okay? And you're going to need as many guys to find out mid-season, all right, who's the best fit? What's my best lineup? What's my best lineup for situations, okay? The only way you do that is by having proper depth. And that's something that, like you said with the Lakers, like you said with the Heat, that's why they're in the finals. Obviously, LeBron James, and then to a much lesser degree, Jimmy Butler, are huge. It's about the depth as well for that team. And it's about those two players making that depth even better, because they fit from a scheme perspective, from a skill set perspective. So really, I could pound the table all day long. I know you can too. This team needs to add shooting. Kind of feels like we've been saying that for a lot of years because we have been saying it for a lot of years.
Yeah, we really have.
Hopefully this offseason changes. So really, that's I've been so grateful to have you on today, Dave. We're looking forward upcoming to what the rest of the offseason has in store for us. We should be hearing, hopefully by the end of the weekend, maybe early next week, about who the head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers will be going forward. I think that David and I, again, are agreed that we each have our guy, and that Ty Lue, who's not either of our guy, will end up being the coach of the Sixers. But honestly, if I got to rationalize it, like you said, he's not Brett Brown. And I don't mean that as a Brett Brown diss. Brett Brown is a good coach. His time was up. Getting that new voice, maybe that's enough. We'll see. So David, before we part, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Anything that we said, and again, any emphasis really on what the Sixers need to focus on this offseason?
Not much, but I'm sure I'll talk myself into Ty Lue being a good head coach once he's hired, because that's where it's trending to. But no, not really, Zach. It was a pleasure, man. Thanks so much for having me on. It's always a joy sitting down and talking some Sixers with you.
Oh, absolutely. Likewise. That's David Esser, good friend of mine. Okay, absolutely. Please go out and follow him. You can check out all of the articles that he has on he's on Bleacher Report quite often, but on Philly Sports Network. Follow him on Twitter, David Esser _, and please, also make sure that you're checking him out, not only on our site, but that you're checking him out on Fansided. Listen to the Bullpen Blues. It's so aptly named. It's a beautiful name. I'm jealous of it every single day because it just surmises really the state of the Philadelphia Phillies. So whether you like baseball or not, I don't care. Give it a listen. All right. But that's it for us today. Again, I'm your host, Zach Ciavolella. David and I, my good friend, we just hit you with the Baseline Scoop.